All right, we'll call the meeting to order. I'll look to the board for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we'll get right into the meeting. We have introduction of added items and new business, the public resource agenda, and the delegation amendment from North Talbot Working Group on Police Matters. So look for a motion to add those items. Moved by Mr. Lang, seconded by the mayor. Any discussion? All those in favor? It carries, so those items are added onto the agenda, and we'll deal with those at the appropriate time. So look for a motion if there's any discussion on the April 18th meeting minutes. Seeing none, look for a mover. Moved by Susan, seconded by Vanessa. All those in favor? Carries. Deputy Longworth, any comments? Or you want us to look to the board? Any board members on this item? The Human Resources matter? Seeing none, look for a motion to approve. Moved by Helmer, seconded by Jeff. All those in favor? Carries. That the board, so now we have public reports of correspondence that the board received for information purposes, the 4 big 12 nominations as determined by the vote. So we're just receiving that for information purposes. So not seeing any discussion. Moved by Vanessa, seconded by Ed. All those in favor? Carries. All right, I think this one will probably just go right to conversation.
Never called me Ed.
We'll go to
It feels so personal.
no problem, Ed. We'll go to Deputy Chief Longworth relating to the provincial policing grants. I'm sure the public wants to hear about this, or the chief or whoever. I'll leave it between you two. Oh, sorry, did I skip something? All right, so hate bias motivated crimes. That's an important item. Sorry, I didn't have that in my cheat sheet.
Just by way of background, the hate and extremism file falls under our intelligence unit with that portfolio, but it's really the responsible of all officers to identify hate and extremism in the occurrences and the calls for service that they attend. So that's why the training of our officers is so important, to pick up accurate information during those calls, and that's why the statistics have improved generally over the years, and greater reporting on behalf of the public too. Frequently we get questions about the Stats Canada numbers that are released because they don't always coincide with our local stats, and that's just because Stats Canada includes within the London statistics also St. Thomas and the greater metropolitan area. So the stats aren't consistent with ours, but we monitor these statistics yearly, and there's no trends that we've noticed in 2018. So subject to any questions.
Thank you for the report, Deputy. Look to the board for any questions or comments. Helmer?
Yeah, I wonder through the chair to Deputy Chief Williams. Last year when we looked at this report, I don't want to put too much weight on one year being substantially higher, in overall counts, because we're just looking at 1 year, but 2018 looks like it's relatively the same as the year before. So we have 2 years where it's sort of both are a bit higher, especially when you look at something like assault, where there's a fairly high number of charges there, and quite a large number of incidents. I know it's a small number of incidents overall, but it's a big change from what we've seen a few years previous. Is there anything that we're doing in response to what we're seeing there? I know this, in the grand scheme of all the assaults, this is still a small number of the assaults, but that's very concerning.
Yes, we did pick up on that, and as you say, we need to look at multiple years to really identify any trends. But I think it's probably a function of two things: public more willingness to report, but our officers are picking up on cues when they're speaking with victims and witnesses that may flag an incident as a hate crime, and assaults as a a frequent example of that. So that's probably part of it, but we'll look over 2019 and 20 to determine if that continues.
Any other board members? Vanessa?
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up about this report and how information is gathered and reported, I'm wondering if, through the Chair, to Deputy Chief, would we be noticing an increase in overall violence related to hate, or are we seeing just certain individuals who are more active? So do we know that if there are more individual incidents, or is this perhaps one or two individuals wreaking havoc?
That's difficult to say from this report. There are some frequent flyers, shall we say, in the city, and every city has certain individuals who may be responsible for a greater number of incidents, but there's no, it's not weighted one way or the other really within these statistics.
Any other board members? Vice Chair?
We've chatted about this before, and I think I brought it up in 2017 as perhaps one of the reasons for that bit of a spike that we saw, which was a greater comfort level with reporting these kinds of incidents and the trust in that community. Could you speak to that a little bit more in terms of last year and maybe just what's happening now? And I'm curious because I know that we have a diversity officer, but he's building communities and relationships and building that trust. But is he finding people go to him and talk about incidents and so on?
That's a good question. Part of our outreach includes through the diversity officer, also through our school officers and our officers in the within the hate crime portfolio speak to schools as well and other community groups. So the more educated they are, and hopefully the relationships are there where they do feel comfortable coming forward. But we get complaints through all of those avenues. Sometimes it comes to us via social media, so through Twitter, Facebook, things like that, and through the diversity officer. So it's sort of a bit of everything.
Thank you very much, through you, Chair, to the deputy. You look at these kinds of statistics, and to your point earlier, there seems to be a reasonable amount of, I'll say, status quo. But I look around the areas that frankly have broader implications around racial slurs, things of that sort, where I think racism can have some very negative implications for the city. And the fact that in that particular area, in terms of reported incidents, it's the highest it's been, dramatically so. If I can say 2.5 times the 2017 level. To what extent do you take that kind of information, Deputy, and how does are there ways to respond to that, or is there advice you'd give to us that we can, listen, we want London to be considered a community that people could come in freely and free of harassment and of any sort. And so does that proffer any suggestions that you might have that the community might consider? Because I think it's our obligation as well as a community.
Well, I mean, part of the issue is when these racial slurs is a good example. When they do come to our attention, quite often it's a hate incident, and we track that as such, but it's not necessarily a hate crime. Because hate crime legislation only comes into effect upon sentencing, and that's why the Stats Canada numbers are also different. But I mean, for us, it's a matter of continuing to educate people. It's a greater public social discussion rather than just law enforcement, but educate people and support tolerance and any anti-hate initiatives that we're involved in through the schools, through our diversity officer, and encourage people to report it again, because if we don't if we don't receive the reports, we can't deal with it. But from a police perspective, we try to mediate the issues and try to resolve conflict peacefully and refer people to appropriate assistance when required. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I don't think there's a one solution that could fall to us.
Well, actually, I'm not sure I had as good a question as your answer. But I'm troubled by, as much as it's only 10 more, but it's 10 more. And when the prior year was an aggregate of seven offenses, and now it's 17, that's, to me, that's dramatic in London, Ontario. And I don't know if there's things like, I think in my mind about the importance of safe streets in this city. And I think of the negative impact the street preachers have had, and I'm being really declarative. I am absolutely offended by that kind of conduct that they put upon individuals. So I'm just trying to get a sense from you if there's, is the trend going, the trend is clearly the wrong way in 2018, but can you, any sense from 2019 in the first 4 months and any read as to whether that's consistently high, or can you give us any indication? We didn't ask you to look at 2019. I'm just trying to get a sense if we're trending the wrong way or if 1 year was just an anomaly of the worst sort.
I think it's too soon to say. There were 2 or 3 very well publicized incidents in 2018 and maybe at the tail end of 2017. They were in the media, on social media as well. And typically when we see that happen, then other individuals are more likely to report. So this could just be a function of reporting behavior. We haven't seen anything in 2019 yet. We're only at May so far, but we'll certainly look at the end of year numbers and see if it is a trend upwards or is this a blip. And if it's a blip, as I said, it could be just better reporting or more reporting on behalf of the public. So it's too soon to say.
Thank you, Chair. Just another question. In terms of data collection, I know that this is what's required by compliance, but do we, as a service, do you keep track of other numbers? And I think maybe more specifically, I'm asking, are you looking at what groups are being targeted more? Are you seeing any trends in terms of these particular groups are now more likely to, or there's an increasing against, I don't know, Islamophobia, for example, or anti-Semitic, that kind of thing?
We have that data. I don't have it with me, but I can tell you that we haven't noticed any trends either way.
Thank you, Chair. I think to actually build on Susan's question, when I look at a report such as this, I can't help but have more questions about the implication of who's being targeted. And as I think through at a broader level, I do reflect on a situation in Thunder Bay wherein there was a noticeable pattern of increased anti-Indigenous racism, and it actually had an impact on the police service as well as the police board. And so I think through whether we need to be aware of who's being targeted so that we can be more analytical in our own position in our own ability to carry forward some of the sensitive work that we're advancing, especially around things like sexual assault investigation, as we engage with the communities who are typically not only more vulnerable but targeted by these types of hate incidents. And so I just wonder if there if there is room for us to monitor and be more aware of what the detail and what the impact and implications of who's being targeted. Just because I think that level of information at this point in time is very important in terms of just being aware of our own place and situation, or our own placement and positionality. So my question, I guess, would be, is it possible for us to have access to more detailed information about these incidents?
It is possible, and I think, you know, in future years, we could beef up the report with some of that information. Keeping in mind that the numbers are, in some of the categories, are quite low, so I think we just have to be careful drawing any conclusions. But your point is well taken, and I can tell you, if there is one specific community that, because of something that occurs in you know, in the media or anywhere in the world that appears to be targeted, and there's, you know, a rash of incidents or reports, then we will do some targeted outreach to that. We've done that with the mosques in London before. So we do look for those trends, and we reach out as a police service, but for the board, I think moving forward, we could provide more information within this report.
Seeing no other speakers, look for a motion to receive the report. Moved by Vanessa, seconded by Helmer. All those in favor? It carries. Now we'll go to Deputy Longworth for the provincial policing grants. Deputy?
Yeah, at the onset, I just want to point out that we've always been aware that these grants were never guaranteed into perpetuity, and that someday that funding stream could be altered or changed drastically. And I'm referring specifically in this report to what we call the CPP, the SCOOP, and the PAVIS grants that we've been receiving for a number of years. The report highlights that we've received in the past from these three grants over $2.5 million that went directly towards supporting frontline policing positions. These grants have been discontinued, and they've been replaced with a new community safety and policing grant. Although the specifics are still being reviewed, we're expecting that the funding allocation for the London Police Service from one of the three funding streams available to us is going to be $1.9 million, which is an overall reduction in that total $2.5 million. The reduction is $638,000. Now, there are two other grant streams available to us, and none of this money I'm talking about is guaranteed. However, of the three different grant streams, we are actively pursuing all grant opportunities, and I'm confident that we'll put together a very robust, very comprehensive, very defendable grant application for at least the 1.9 million. The other funding stream that's probably provides the most opportunities for us to get some money out of is a pot of $3.9 million that is a competitive process that will be competing with other police organization in the province. So although I am confident we'll get some of that money, it certainly will not make up the $638,000 shortfall. The remaining grant funding stream available to us is probably not going to do much benefit for us by the way of supporting what we've lost. That funding stream is more for new joint forces operations centering around guns and gangs and human trafficking initiatives. So, like I said, we will be pursuing all three of those grant opportunities. As far as the shortfall this year, obviously we always try and find the money internally within the organization with our current budget first before we look at any other opportunities. But I will point out that is becoming increasingly more difficult. You know, you guys know that 93% of our budget is made up primarily of human resources and staffing. So without talking about staffing reductions, there's a very limited portion of our budget that we can play with. So in any event, we will be looking to our budget first to look at shortfalls. London Police Service is already very lean. Demands on our police service and our police officers' time and the expectations from the community continue to rise. And unfortunately, the municipality bears a big brunt of that, the funding burden that we have to place on the community. And so those opportunities for finding resources are becoming more complex and more challenging. So happy to answer any specific questions about the funding. I will put the board on notice that the grant applications are due June 6th, long before our next board meeting. So you can expect to hear from me before the next board meeting with our grant applications to look for support and signatures on that.
Thank you. So I can't go anywhere till June 6th. All right, look to the board for any questions. Lang?
Through you, Chair, to the Deputy. What about federal funding? And has there been any indication so far, is there any federal funding available to replace some of this provincial cutback?
I'm not aware of any federal funding coming to support this. It's unfortunate, as I mentioned earlier, that 93% of our budget is funded through the municipality. So this limited portion of our budget funded by the province and federal government, when even though our policing efforts are directed locally, a big chunk of what we do is on provincial initiatives, federal initiatives, and based on provincial and federal legislation. So it would be nice to see more funding support from both the province and the federal government, but I'm not aware of any at this point coming from the federal government to support us in this.
So I guess the practical question is this. The easy answer always is to say, we'll just put it back to the budget. But ultimately, with one taxpayer, the concern, and we've got great folks, all of us working together for that. And we keep coming back to a reality of the most significant part of our budget is our staffing. But the other part of it is maybe there are some things we don't need to do. And I certainly would not consider myself expert in this. But it strikes me that sometimes there's that absolute have to list, and then there's the seriously would like to want to list. And I'm mindful that as I have great confidence in our board members who are working through the budget, and I appreciate that effort. But I'm mindful, and I say this as a broad comment, that song, you can't always get what you want. And I think that with the financial restraints that we're seeing at the provincial level now, as they work towards balancing their budget and doing what they're doing and changing their priorities, maybe that's one of the things that we have to take a bit of a shake and a look at and see what areas that we would want to consider, particularly in light of these challenges. Because I empathize with what you're going through, and I wish you great success in the grant process. It will be what it will be, but if not, we all recognize, all of us around this table, that we can't keep going back to the well. So we maybe have to look at some of the things that we do differently. And so I'm saying Godspeed, but I'm also saying, as I say that we have to be mindful as well that maybe we're not don't always look at things the way that we used to, and happy to make contributions to that from an opinion standpoint as we work through this process. So good luck on the grants.
Yeah, thank you. And if I could just respond to that comment, I agree with you 100% that we need to look at the service we provide and the delivery of our services, and we constantly do that. And things aren't the way they used to be, but the community has changed drastically too. And in addition to the cuts that the policing sector has seen, we've also seen significant cuts being delivered to public health, mental health services. And as much as those issues don't fall under the definition of law enforcement, they are obligations by our police service to make sure we're providing a safe community and a community that's well and operating well. And unfortunately, at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're the only game in town a lot of times. And when we're faced with mental health issues, when we're faced with homelessness, when we're faced with a lot of these things that wouldn't traditionally fall under law enforcement, we have to deal with them because we're talking about members of this community who have an expectation or a right to be looked after and trying to deliver the best service we can to them. So although I appreciate 100% what you're talking about being fiscally responsible, times have changed, and the responsibility of a police officer has changed to just from going out and arresting people and putting them in jail to servicing the entire community on a number of different fronts. So I'll leave it at that.
I appreciate that candor. I would say that what are we always trying to do? We're trying to balance care and cost. And I think care and the services provided, I don't think there's anyone here that would suggest that that's not unimportant. And how you try to find those balances, or are there others that might be able to do that thing? I can't tell you that. I think that's part of the challenge, certainly. But a big issue, and it's not just with the police budget, but we're looking at that as we review all of our civic budgets. So I know it's not an easy process, and I know you'll pay mind to it, and we'll work with you in that respect as well. So when I say good luck, and I really mean it. And, steps at a time, Chair.
Any other board members? Jesse?
Thank you. Through the chair to Deputy Chief Longworth, I wonder if you could just explain to the board sort of what has happened overall with the grants, because my understanding is that the total grant envelope has sort of stayed the same, but that the OPP has been added in as an eligible police service. I don't know if you just speak to sort of what the overall changes are, because it seems like sort of the same amount of money going into policing from the provincial funding stream, but it's going to different police services potentially. And so I don't know if you could speak to that.
Yeah, the 3 grants that I referenced in the report traditionally have been put in place to provide provincial funding to municipal police services, to municipalities to deal with provincial issues and to support frontline policing from a provincial standpoint. My understanding is the same as yours, that the funding allotted by the province in this area has not changed, but a new player has been brought into the table, and the OPP has never traditionally been allowed to pursue this funding because they are a provincial funded entity. This go around under this new grant advisory, the OPP has access to the funding just like we do. And in fact, it's not just the organization itself, each individual detachment can apply for the funding based on their local and provincial needs in their area. So what we saw was a 25% reduction in the funding from these 3 grants. In speaking with police leaders across the province, every single organization seems to have experienced around that same 25% marker. And I can only guess that all that money's been pooled and made available in the big pot that now the provincial government, or the OPP now has funding available to them as well, if that answers your question.
Any other discussion? Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate Mayor Holder's comments about, you know, this is where we're at. These are attempts to balance the budget. I have some really deep concerns about these cuts, as you mentioned, the cuts that are into mental health, public health units and so on. And I don't actually think that any of this is going to go anywhere near to helping balance the budget. If anything, it's going to, I think, increase costs, and it's quite short-sighted. So I'm wondering, in terms of any leadership from the board, is there something that can be done? Is there anything that we can do to support? I mean, you know, is it worth perhaps raising our concerns about these cuts and the implications and the long-term implications, the long-term cost, not only to our community, but to the municipality, to individuals? Is it worth doing something like that? And I'm looking to all of you, wondering if there's any advocacy that we can do.
I would certainly say it can't hurt. I mean, I think from the OACP, from the police leadership, there will be some ongoing discussions. And I think, I hope this is, although unfortunate news, I hope it sparks a greater conversation about funding for policing and public safety from the provincial government. And like I mentioned earlier, although a big chunk of what we do is responding to local needs, it's responding to provincial and federal legislation and initiatives. And both federal and the provincial government have to do their part in supporting through funding, and the London taxpayer or wherever municipality you're from shouldn't have to bear the full brunt of the policing costs. So I simply answer your question, I don't think it can hurt. I know the chiefs are going to be advocating, and it'd be nice if the police services boards did as well.
Just if I can add to that, and I think some of it has been danced around here when it comes to the funding model for policing. And when you look at the funding model, it's municipally based, essentially. And they really don't have much say in terms of what the legislation, federal legislation, provincial responsibilities are, but the funding drops. And I get it's all one taxpayer, but there's other provinces, and this is one of the positions that I think we need to look at is, what is the proper funding, whether it be federal funding for all municipal police services across Canada? What is the municipal contribution to that funding, and then the provincial, and then what is the municipal funding? That's where there's a real change in what needs to be done around the funding. It always falls to the local taxpayer. There's no federal money. Years ago we had some funding, and that was eliminated. There has never been any more. But I think we need to look at overall what is the proper funding model. And like I said, other provinces, you'll see federal funding, you'll see provincial funding, and then you see municipal funding. So.
Yes, thank you, and those are very helpful. I would like to move that the board draft a letter, and I think the chief raised a really excellent point that perhaps there's some room here to also engage the federal government on this issue, and simply state our concerns, and say that there are significant impacts with these kinds of changes, and perhaps the best thing to do is actually to bump this down to the Community Relations Subcommittee for further discussion on what the content of the letter is, but I would look for the board as a whole for support in doing that.
So look for a seconder. Helmer?
Well, I have a slightly different idea, which is, I think this is an issue that's affecting a lot of police services throughout the province, right? It's not, unfortunately, just an issue here in London. And I think it's something that the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards is going to have a collective kind of opinion on. And I think it's probably the first thing we should do is raise it with them and say, you know, what do we all think about these changes? The grant programs are new. We'll have to see, I think, how they turn out. We knew that changes were coming for quite some time, and this is not the first time that the Association of Police Service Boards or the Association of Chiefs has advocated around what's going to happen with the police funding grants. So I think that's probably the first place to go, rather than just something from our police service board directly to the province. I think probably having a discussion at the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards is what I would support now, because I think we need to kind of galvanize the whole province to talk about this issue.
So I'll look to the mover of the motion if she's supportive of that wording.
Yeah, I'm comfortable doing that as a first step and revisiting whether or not we want a letter at a later date.
So it's been moved by the vice chair. Would I assume the Helmer's second in that motion? Jeff?
The primary concern that I see going into the budget deliberations, and, you know, I have the benefit of having my colleagues from City Council also involved in that process. We're in a very fluid place right now when it comes to provincial funding and any kind of core funding. And I'm questioning to myself the effectiveness or the validity of looking at four-year contracts when we really don't know what our funding model is going to look like in 6 months. And I'm wondering if perhaps in our budget deliberations with regards to the Police Services Board, that we might want to take a little bit more short-term view of what we have to deal with today, so that we have an ability to react as the policies, funding changes come down the pipe. And I would suspect that we're going to see other changes. There's a federal election this year as well. And I think you can pretty much count on a number of different factors playing into our deliberations over the next short while. I'm not sure if this board or any other board is in a position to predict where we're going to be in 4 years from now. And I think it's a foundational question that we as a board have to get our head around, because I think we're going to have to be a lot more reactive going forward than proactive, unfortunately, and not by design, but by reality. So I just wanted to, I wanted to throw that out there to my colleagues on the budget committee. This is going to be a very difficult deliberation for everybody. The city's going to have tremendous pressure on it to find funding, and then they're going to have to make some changes, and I'm sure that we're going to have to do exactly the same thing. So I just wanted to throw that out as sort of a basis for the beginning of our discussions.
Look for any other discussion? Seeing none, we have, the motion has been moved and seconded in relation to the letter, or sorry, the communication to our Ontario Association. Seeing no further discussion, we'll call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. And now we're going to head into our delegation. So if they want to just make their way up to, there's a desk right here if they just want to grab the mic. And you have 10 minutes. So Hi, and thank you for coming in. You have 10 minutes to speak, and we're all yours.
So I'm here with my neighbors, and we want to talk about specific issues relating to our neighborhood. So I will provide background information on why we decided to talk to London Police Services about community policing, what the problems are that we want to resolve, and why foot patrols would assist in alleviating these problems. I approached London Police Services late last year to discuss what many of us in the North Talbot neighborhood see as persistent problems that predictably occur year after year and are not getting any better. I approached London Police Services to discuss a new approach to community policing, as the current strategy is just spinning wheels. Residents will always call the police first because they see them as peace officers, and the police like to describe themselves as peace officers. And keeping the peace is fundamental, in our view, in crime prevention because it de-escalates incidents that could potentially become confrontational. I also knew that talking to the police, they would understand what our concerns are because they are present on the street. Whereas the understanding of city politicians is and was peripheral at best. The problems I am referencing relate directly to Informed Response, which is a new program, noise related to Richmond Row and student rentals. Family houses in our neighborhood are dominated by student rentals that often sit empty for 5 months out of the year, April to September. During this time, it's not unusual to have squatters take up residency in these homes. Many of us do not call the police because homelessness is not a crime, and landlords are absent. For example, 3 years ago, one gentleman took up occupancy on a front porch 2 houses next to me, and he was a really good neighbor. He was clean and quiet and left sometime in mid-August before the tenants returned. However, since the city enacted Informed Response, where police and bylaw officers push residents off the streets, there has been an influx of residents looking for private places to bed down. And this winter, we had a big influx of people in the neighborhood. Now, people are breaking into apartment buildings and underground parking lots, under porches, in private backyards, and we've noticed it all winter. So since the program was initiated, Sergeant Potruff of the Foot Patrol Division confirmed that people move out of the downtown into Soho first, and then into North Talbot. Now people are feeling overwhelmed, and they are basically left to cope on their own. And a lot of these people exhibit addiction, and depending on what sort of drug is their preference, their behavior can be something you're not used to. I'm actually a critic of Informed Response because while the program is marketed as a compassionate approach to homelessness, the goal remains pushing people out of the downtown because they're unsightly to business. Every city has a homeless problem. When I lived in Toronto, the city had an average population of 30,000 people without permanent addresses. But they had a non-police, non-bylaw officer approach. They had outreach workers that went out every day to check up on people and ensure they were safe. And all we're doing here is pushing them out, and then they go deeper into hiding, and you lose track of them, and you can't ensure that they're safe because you don't know where they are. Informed Response is just moving the problem from one area to another, and while there's been some success in finding people homes, that success can happen without creating a bigger problem somewhere else. So I want to emphasize to you that how afraid I am for the residents that live on the street, because now they have to deal with the police, which is always intimidating at best. And I personally would never call the police on someone who's just trying to find a quiet place. But I also know people are feeling overwhelmed, and we just want to find a better solution because we as neighbors are feeling like we can't cope. The next issue is noise. Noise is a big issue in our neighborhood and the most contentious when it comes to the police. Police for years have neglected to enforce the noise bylaw, especially as it relates to commercial properties on Richmond Road. The noise bylaw, now called the sound bylaw, is very clear. Part 2, Section 1, 2, and 3 states clearly that any noise clearly audible within a residential area will be deemed to disturb inhabitants. Because there's always an issue of discretion, I verified with the zoning office at City Hall that amplified sound, as described in Section 2(4)B, takes precedence over any permits issued under the temporary noise permit for amplified sound for patios, because the bylaw does not explicitly exempt patio permit holders of Section 2(1), 2, and 3, and 2.4B. The section of the noise bylaw that has been in place for years, this section, and yet when residents complain to police about loud amplified sound from patios, the police staunchly refuse to enforce the bylaw. Even though these complaints came in fast and furious, at first I felt very confused as to why this section of the bylaw was being ignored when the police enforced the bylaw as it is written when it comes to amplified sound being generated from a residential source and not a commercial source. And I'm still waiting for a reply, and I'm hoping I can get a reply today because the bylaw does not discriminate. The other issue we're having that's becoming very prevalent is just the sound bylaw prohibits excessive screaming and shouting in a residential area. However, screaming has become so prevalent late at night that it's become as problematic as amplified sound. Police officers and cruisers simply cannot detect this problem, and it has been suggested by Sergeant Potruff that we ask police officers and cruisers to stop and walk around periodically in the neighborhood to address issues of noise and security. The problem with police officers and cruisers is that they are visible blocks away. During disturbing sound is lowered with approaching police cars and then ramped up again once they leave. It's become this big laughing matter in my neighborhood because they just play footsie around the police approaching the source of sound. And it's so bad at times that I need to call 911 to ensure the disturbance is officially recorded. Otherwise, there's no evidence of this disturbance has occurred and the complaint is not taken seriously. I don't want to have to do that. What I really want is some sort of proactive enforcement which sets a lasting tone in the neighborhood. The last section is student noise and landlords. The bulk of large student disturbances are sourced from single-family homes rented per room to individuals, adults. These renters tend to have new tenants every year. It's estimated that 4 to 6 landlords own 90% of these rental houses in the North Talbot neighborhood. Landlords understand that the provisions under the nuisance bylaw, and I'm a landlord as well, so I should say that. Landlords understand that the provisions under the nuisance bylaw naming landlords as being potentially responsible for the actions of their tenants is likely unlawful, unenforceable, and it's ignored. As tenants of these rentals tend to rotate yearly, the constant element in these scenarios is the landlord. And being a landlord myself, I support placing greater responsibility on landlords to prevent and curtail loud disturbances from their rentals. We want to explore preventative strategies so we don't have to call the police, because calling the police and having a heavy police presence in the neighborhood is not desirable, and we know the police rather not be there themselves. If there needs to be policing in the area, then foot patrols are the best option because they see more, they understand more, and would be more effective in resolving the more fleeting problems such as screaming in the streets, trespassing issues, break-ins, and developing community relations, even with those people that tend to take up occupancy in houses that are empty. We also support a zero tolerance approach to these problems because residents are already practicing a zero tolerance. Through experience, zero tolerance appears to be the most effective in dealing with individuals that have no connection to the neighborhood and are just passing through. And I would appreciate a reply to my longstanding answer is why the police are selective on how they enforce the sound bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. And if you just stand there for 1 second, I just want to make sure there's no questions from the board for you from the presentation. And then maybe we'll get into comments and responses if appropriate. So not seeing any questions from the board. I did have some comments from my chair's perspective, and then I guess I'll open it up to administration if they wanted to respond. But I think when you talked about noise complaints and some of those pieces and saying the obligations of the police, you know, as a city councilor, I was one of the people who asked that, you know, police not respond to noise complaints, you know, so I'll take some of that responsibility because I believe that, you know, it really is a bylaw function. I feel that their time is more utilized better doing some of the important work that's being asked in our community. Also, just the economic perspective of it where, you know, the cost is 60% less, 60% is the cost of sending a police officer to do that work. And I think, I don't think it's still to this day an appropriate response to just have our police officer, but I do recognize your frustration. But that's why you know, at the council level, I asked for us to have more bylaw officers in the community so that they could respond to those issues that you're facing with. So have you not seen a better response even with that? Or do you want more bylaw officers is what you're asking for? Or you still want police officers, I guess is my question to you.
We'll never call bylaw officers unless we have to, which is Friday nights and Saturday nights. We find them ineffective. They don't talk to us. They're seen coming down the block. Then when they're coming down the block, they just turn the music down. And when they leave, they turn the music up. They don't have a zero tolerance. They're very lenient. Sometimes they don't show up at all. And then we call the police. The bylaw told us they call the police too when the gatherings are too large for them to cope. The police are, in some cases, not always, the police are easier to talk to. But I'll tell you, I hate calling the police as well. I hate having to wait up for them. I hate having to make the call. I hate the confrontation of it all. And so what we're looking for is something that's not confrontational, that's not stressful, and that is more community-based. And that's why I'm here. I understand the background that you did that. You don't have to tell me that. I'm heavily involved in this issue. I'm really here to talk to the police, and I really want a different approach to policing in these sorts of neighborhoods. Our neighborhood's very urban, it has a lot of problems. Our neighbors have lived there for decades. These issues are real. I get woken up now by people on, not on opiates, but on crack. And that behavior is very surreal. If you've seen people really high on crack, you know, the behavior is very erratic.
And I thank you for that response, just because your delegation time is up. So I'll look to the board before I see if administration has any comments. Any other comments from the board? I'm seeing if administration chooses, because I just want to remind you that this is definitely a board meeting. You know, you're always welcome to reach out to London Police Service directly, but today you're speaking to the London Police Service Board. I just want to make that distinction clear. So I'll look to the chief if he chooses to make any comments on this.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate you bringing this forward. And part of the challenge always been is managing the calls for service and the priority that we have to assign to them in the available resources. And, you know, we were just talking about the budget earlier, and you know, the mayor brings up about what we do and don't do. And some of the resources you talked about are not mandated policing resources, even foot patrol or the core unit. And so we're entering a difficult time, and we realize the value of those programs. And you're absolutely right, the value that they bring, and they are stretched thin. We would love to expand it to lots of areas around the city because we often get those demands. But as we enter into our budget process, as we enter into, we're in a new business plan, we're looking at those things and using our crime analysts to identify those problem areas. So it's important you continue to call us so that we can deploy our resources where they need to be and continue to work with the community to address those issues. So.
It just seems to make sense that you would approach community, other cities have done it, so this is not like a sort of Einstein idea. Lots of cities have taken this route because it's more economical. It just is a better form of policing, but this city hasn't done it, yeah. And I would like a reply to my question as why the bylaw is applied differently depending on who's generating the sound. At a later date, maybe, that's fine, but I do want a reply.
And thank you very much for your submission. And I will also add, as you're leaving today, that there will also be opportunities to speak to the budget, and hopefully in the future, the chair of the Budget Committee, Deputy Mayor Helmer, will speak to that in the future, in the near future, to talk about opportunities. And maybe that's an opportunity where you could talk about the resources that you feel are important to you, as well as I know City Council will be having those public participation meetings related to the budget. So I thank you and your group for coming today. Thank you so much. No, it's a 10-minute delegation for all of you. That's what the delegation request is for all of you. No, it's a 10-minute delegation. It'd be a long day if everybody got 10 minutes. I mean, if there's something that you want to say within a minute, just because I feel bad that you folks all came down here, there's something that's been missed, I'll allow that flexibility as chair unless someone wants to challenge me, but I'll really confine it to a minute. So if someone wants to come up, they can, if it's something new. Yes, come on up, please. And again, you also have the opportunity to apply for a delegation if it's something else, if you don't get to see.
That's the issue of the budgetary situation with the police department and the difficulty in responding to these types of calls. And some of the things that they have implemented in other cities are actually saving police departments money. They're putting, for lack of a better word, red tag laws in place, and I think you might have all received a copy of those. And apparently, after the initial enforcement of red tag laws, the call loads drop off precipitously. This results in a budgetary advantage to the city. It gives the police an extra tool to work with. The city keeps the fines because now there seem to be contact with people who are having parties and making noise, but the contact doesn't seem to be resulting in any generation of fines. And the fines are a big deterrent. If you don't have anybody basically having accountability, you're not going to see a change in behavior. And the councillors have to deal with fewer complaints from the constituents. Thank you.
Perfect, and thank you again. And also, if there was anything else you wanted, if there's something written, we're more than happy to take that and distribute that to the members of the board, or if you want to send it to us electronically, you also have that option here today. So,
I did send it to you already.
no, I'm saying if there's anything else in addition, but thank you very much, and thank you for your delegation. So I look for a motion to receive that delegation. Moved by Jeff, seconded by Susan. All those in favor? And it carries. Thank you again. So look for any other new business items. I believe we dealt with them both, the Public Human Resources Report. And then we have an item from the Vice Chair, an added item. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to provide a quick update to the community about the Legal Governance Policy Subcommittee. We had an excellent meeting on Monday to discuss priorities for the upcoming year. A few different issues came up. The top priority for us right now is getting our terms of reference drafted. Those terms of references could then be used by the other subcommittee groups as a model to, again, establish mandate, membership, and so on. The other things that we discussed that we'll prioritize a little later in the year is also going to be just an overall review of board bylaws and policies and identifying where there might still be some gaps, and then start tackling that probably in the fall.
Thank you. Any questions for the Vice Chair? Seeing none, I look for a motion to receive the verbal update. Moved by Deputy Mayor Helmer, seconded by Vanessa. All those in favor? And it carries. So just two important items. I just want to congratulate the winners of the London Police Service Section Hockey League this year. Two-section, Staff Sergeant Dwayne Price for scoring the winning goal. So shout out to the hockey team. So congrats to them. So please go ahead, Chief.
Truth be known, it was an empty net, so just.
So hopefully he's not watching right now, but I'm sure we'll get back to him. So speaking of the chief, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say a couple things. It's actually the chief's last police board meeting, Chief John's final meeting before his retirement come this June. So Chief John Pair began his policing career with LaSalle Police Service in 1987, and 2 years later began his career with the London Police Service as a cadet recruit. He worked in uniform patrol in major section and held management positions in professional standards branch, human resources branch, community policing branch, and corporate services division. John was promoted to deputy chief in January of 2012 and to chief in May of 2015. Chief Pair is vice president of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, chair of the John Howard Society of London and District, and a board of director of the Canadian Mental Health Association of Ontario. His volunteer efforts in the community have resulted in him receiving the Child Find Ontario Outstanding Efforts on behalf of Missing Children Award, the Police Exemplary Service Medal, and the Middlesex Optimist Club Respect for Law Award. Chief Pair was recipient of the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2013 and was invested in the Order of Merit of the Police Forces in 2015. Throughout his career, he has been identified as a leader and expert in various police issues, including investigative strategies and those associated with mental health. He is known for his interpersonal competencies and collaborative efforts with many groups touched by policing issues in our community, his strong work ethic and deep passion and advocacy for his community, London Police Service members, and the London Police Organization as a whole. We recognize and thank you, Chief, for your significant achievements and continuous contributions to leading progressive change in policing, for making life better for some of our community members, for some of our community's most vulnerable members, and we wish you a long, healthy, and happy retirement. I did want to turn to the board to see if there is anyone who wishes to speak. A vice chair and
I could tell lots of stories. Most of them good, all of them good. I thought I just wanted to share a couple of things that I think really have, to me, exemplified the leadership style that you've shown as the chief. And the first is when I first joined the board, I participated in the Citizens Academy, which is a great opportunity if anybody in the public's interested. And there are quite a few staff members who are participating in the Citizens Academy, mostly civilian members. And I don't think that they knew that I was on the board, you know. And the story I kept hearing over and over again was, oh, the chief stopped by the office today, or, you know, he came to ask me about, you know, my child or my dog or anything. And the theme I heard was, you check in with everybody. And it would not surprise me in the least if you didn't just know every single person by name, but you probably know their children by name and their pets by name. And what really struck me was how much all of your employees, both civilian and sworn, felt heard and saw you. You know, you weren't just in your office on a daily basis. And the second piece that I think also to me has really been symbolic of your leadership, I read, of course on Facebook, because that's where we all get our information today, but there's a great quote about how the point of discussions and argument should be progress and not just winning. And that to me really captures what I've seen as your approach, because I know that, I know this will come as a shock to everybody here, but you and I on occasion have disagreed on issues, but it has never, ever been any doubt that at the end of the day, what you and I were fighting for was progress, and you in particular were more interested in the outcome than just winning the argument. It was never about that. To you, it was, where is this gonna get us? How are we gonna make things better? And I just want to say it's been a real pleasure getting to know you and working with you. And as the chair said, I really wish you all the best. You're going to be missed. I think you've done a lot in a very short time. And I know that the next chief has big shoes to fill. And I hope you come back and visit us.
I'll look to the board. Mayor?
Actually, since I expect we're going to have a better party than this one, I'll reserve my comments on behalf of, I'll probably take a different role when I make the comments I have, but let's just say, as one of the newest board members, I used to say the newest, but now that Mr. Lang is with us, I can't say that, but it's been a real privilege to serve with you, and if I may say that, it's on behalf of my capacity as a board member. You're a true pro, and we appreciate you. More to come.
So look to the board on the left. Anyone wishing to speak? I know there's people who also have opportunities. Before I get to, sorry.
Somebody can speak?
Before I get to Jennifer. All right, Jennifer, go ahead.
So I've had the pleasure of working with you for almost a decade, far more than everybody around this table combined. And I also had the privilege of being part of the team that put you in this role as admin to the board. So that was thrilling. And I've watched from a very unique perspective your strong and caring leadership. And we don't often talk about the word caring beside the word leadership. But I can say without a doubt that you have both of those in spades, and that's why you've been successful. I'm emotional. Thank you for your commitment to this community, the London Police Service, and for all of the members of the London Police Service, which, as Susan noted, I see it on a daily basis, the people that check in with you, those who you check in with. And from a personal perspective, I know you truly care, because you've also taken me under your wing. The other thing I want to say that I really like about you is I've seen you get choked up even more than I have in my life. So I hope I get to see that before you go. You're a softie. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. So just, I know the deputies will have lots of opportunities, but I just wanted to see if they wanted to say anything in the public forum today before I end it with John having the final word. So not to put them on the spot, I didn't give them notice, so Williams.
Just real briefly, and I will have much more to say at a later date. Some of it in public and some probably not suitable for public, but you know, I've known John for all of my career pretty well. We've been partners starting off in major crime in year 2000, and I've kind of followed him along in my career. Just the way things work out with promotions and transfers, and he's always been a mentor to me, and I'm sure Daryl may have words to say, but I've enjoyed every minute of it. I've learned a lot from him over the years, and it's been a pleasure and an honor working with you.
Deputy Longworth?
I guess I have to say something now.
Sorry.
I'm saddened to see him go, and he knows that, and I'm saddened to see this team broken up, because I think this has been one of the most fantastic teams I've worked with in my career, and I've worked with a lot of different teams. And I will say, and I think John knows this, I'm not sure if the board does, one of the reasons I came here was because I knew John. I've known John since 2010. And when I saw he got promoted, I thought there's somebody I would love to work with and be happy to work for, and haven't regretted any minute since I came here. So there'll be more to say later.
Thank you, deputies. And the last word of the day, the last public board meeting for Chief John, and the last word.
Motion to adjourn? I wasn't going to say this, but I got to say it. It's driving me nuts. But it would have been so much easier if you just went status quo, honestly. Sorry, I had to say it. No, it's funny, too. The mayor mentioned, you know, it can't always get you want with a song, and I've been driving people in the office nuts with, in fact, I played it on the way over here, The Final Countdown by Europe, so I haven't heard that since 1986, when I probably had a mullet myself, so it's interesting. No, I've really had, it's been a privilege serving the citizens of London, and I'm very proud to have been a member of the London Police Service. Very fortunate throughout my career to serve in various roles, and I thank the board for the tremendous honor and privilege to serve as Chief of Police. It's difficult to find the words to express appreciation for all the mentorship that I've received and the privilege to work with such tremendous people. So I have to thank those who do this difficult job each and every day, and that's the members on the front line, both sworn and civilian, the senior management team, and my deputy, Steve and Daryl. They absolute professionalism, the hard work that they do each and every day to keep us safe. And I'm extremely proud of what we've accomplished together, because it hasn't been one person. It's been an entire organization that's moved us forward, so. I have to thank the Londoners, our community partners, and so many others who have supported, encouraged, challenged, and sometimes, some may say often, critiqued me over the course of my tenure as chief. But thank you for assisting our police service to become better partners, to be more informed on issues, and to be more willing to listen and embrace the needed change to meet the needs of our community. And I always tried to listen. I always tried to express my opinions and do what I thought was right. I also have to thank the London Police Association, which is an important partner in all this and often get overlooked. And I appreciate our respectful working relationship, and I believe together we provided the basis for a work environment that encourages dialogue and is capable of meeting change and challenges as they arise for our members and making sure that they're looked after. Also, during my tenure, I had 3 executive assistants. 3 executive assistants in 4 years. You'd think there was a problem with me, but the truth be known, they all said I was the best chief ever that they had to work with. 2 of them retired, and then finally I've ended up with Sam. Susan and Lori know how I appreciated everything they did for me during their tenure, and Sam knows how important she has been in keeping me organized and making sure I was prepared. The last 2 are really difficult. It's going to take me a minute, sorry. I know Sam's watching. It was difficult to say that about you too, Sam. So, but Father Mockler, a true friend who has always been there to listen, offer support, and pray for me. And I'm sure at times, lots of prayers. Hopefully I didn't keep you up too late or get you up too early in the morning. So thank you. And my family for being so supportive over all these years. My children, Carly, Ryan, my daughter-in-law, Danielle, my fabulous, and I pretty well will say perfect grandchildren, Jaden and Audrey, and of course my best friend and my wife, Leanne, who have always been there for me. It has been an honor, a privilege to be part of this amazing police service. We've had many successes and advancements that have helped us to maintain our position as a leader in policing, and I know that that work will continue into the future. Thank you, stay safe, and make sure to make a difference in a person's life.
Thank you very much, Chief. And again, on behalf of the London Police Service Board, thank you for your service. So I'll look for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Jeff, seconded by Vanessa. All those in favor? And it carries. And now I'll go to the public for the open mic portion of the meeting. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the board has 5 minutes. Looking for any speakers, going once, going twice, and 3 times. Thank you. The next police board meeting will be in June. And I'm just giving you the exact date. It is June 20th, 2019. Just a reminder for the board members, we'll be meeting back in the committee room to continue some in-camera item work. And good night. Logging off from London, Ontario.